welcome to Boxing in Your Face. My name is Joe Cortez, international boxing referee from Las Vegas, Nevada. This week I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my past as an amateur fighter, starting back in New York City, back in the early 60s. Now, as a youngster in New York, I got involved with the Boys Clubs of New York for the simple reason that that was the only boxing club in my jurisdiction. So the great Gaspar Indian Ortega, who got me started in boxing, lived in my block, 99th Street, between Park and Madison Avenue. Now, Gaspar Ortega was a top contender. He was about 21 years old when I first met him. And Gaspar had 185 professional fights. But prior to him becoming a contender, fighting 10 rounds in Madison Square Garden, he was actually one of the tough boys in the welterweight division. He was not a heavy puncher, but he was a good slick boxer. He would hit and don't get hit. He would know how to roll with the punches. He was really good and just bobbing and weaving and knocking off punches, a good counter puncher. He was tall, lanky, welterweight. Gaspar, having 185 professional fights, which is not a record, because the great Archie Moore and the great Willie Pep had over 200 fights apiece. But Gaspar Ortega was up there with some of the fighters who were just the best. He beat Benny Kid Paret when Paret was a world champion. Benny Kid Paret, as you all know, died from injuries received from Emil Griffith in the World Championship fight back in 1961, I believe it was. Might have been 62, but I think it was 61. And Gaspar Ortega beat Benny Kid Paret for a non-title fight, and Paret would not give him a rematch for the championship. Well, Emil Griffith gave Gaspar Ortega a shot back in the days when Gaspar was already like 24 years old, but had already 81 professional fights under his belt. And you know, 81 professional fights is a lot compared to some of the fighters you see today, like De La Hoya, Mayweather. These guys had like 40 some odd fights. Gaspar had 185. Anyway, Gaspar fought the greats like Tony DeMarco, beat Tony DeMarco on 2 occasions. They fought 3 times. He beat Kit Gavilan. He fought Don Jordan in California. He fought some of the best and beat them all, but was never given the opportunity. That's when boxing back in the days was not controlled the way it is today. Back in those days, the managers, the trainers, they would choose and pick their fighters. And of course, Gaspar Ortega, being that he was such an unpredictable fighter, had a good record, had a granite chin, could take the best punch in the world, but couldn't deliver the good knockout punches. He would win fights, and most of his fights were all by decision, even though he had like 49 knockouts. But compared to his record, 49 knockouts, most of those knockouts came towards the end of his career, where one year he fought like 27 times. It was some weeks he was fighting 2 or 3 times a week. Some fighters fight maybe once or twice a year. Never mind 2 or 3 times a week. Anyway, Gaspar Ortega gave me my start in the amateurs. When I was 12 years old, I met Gaspar Ortega, my brother Mike as well, Mike Golden Boy Cortez, back in the 60s for some main events in the East Coast. And Gaspar Ortega took me under his wing, got me started with my first professional fight out in Bakersfield, California, then took me out to Hawaii, where I had 4 fights in Hawaii. Then he took me to Mexico, where I had about 10 fights in Mexico, and the rest were a few here and there in New York, and my last fight being a 4-rounder a 6-rounder in Puerto Rico. And that was after I had retired. I came back, won my fight. I had an 18-1 record as a pro, had a lot of fun. But going back to the amateur years, let's go up into the top. When you have, where I won my novice Golden Glove Championships in New York. On the way to that championship, I fought a fighter by the name of Pablo Escobedo for the championship. And I believe this fight here that you see, this picture, was the semifinal. And that was my first Golden Glove Championship at the age of 16. Then the next picture here to the left of that, you have Angelo Soto. Angelo Soto was a top-notch contender as an amateur, national champion. He was great. Angelo Soto, my brother used to come home and tell me, Joe, there's a fighter by the name of Angelo Soto in the gym. This from the Boys Club. He said, that guy is like a professional fighter. Boy, he's slick. He can box. He can punch. He can do it all. Well, 2 years later, I'm fighting Angelo Soto for the Open Championship in Madison Square Garden. So I won my first Open Championship in Madison Square Garden back in 1961. Then you go over to the left here, in Madison Square Garden, I had a fight for the Eastern Championships, and the Eastern Championships, that night I had a fight twice, the same night. The semifinal fight was against a guy named Clyde Tyler, and Clyde Tyler was a champion from his respective state. I believe it was Maryland. And then for the championship fight, that same night, I had to fight a fighter by the name of Ralph Jackson, and Ralph Jackson was another champion from his respective state. This is a tournament of champions. It was called the Eastern Golden Glove Championships. Well, that night, I knocked out two guys the same night, Old Madison Square Garden. And I think that's about, you could say, in the history, the good trivia question is, who's the fighter that knocked out two fighters the same night in Madison Square Garden? Well, that's Joe Cortez. That was only a bantamweight 118 pounder. That's about 50 pounds lighter than what I am today. But it was a lot of fun. And then I went on to fight for the intercity. Back in the day, we called it a National Golden Glove Championship. It was New York versus Chicago. And I beat Oscar German for the National Championship. Now, Oscar German, I believe, is one of the few fighters to ever beat the great trainer Emanuel Stewart. Emanuel Stewart was a bantamweight back in the days when I was boxing as well. I never fought Emanuel Stewart, but we fought the same fighter. Unfortunately, Emanuel got beat, and I ended up beating the guy that beat Emanuel. But Oscar German was a great bantamweight. He was a team captain on the Chicago team for a couple of years prior to fighting me, and he was on the same team with the great Cassius Clay back in the days. And it was a lot of fun fighting in the amateurs. Amateur boxing is great for anyone who really wants to get involved going into the pro ranks. You have to come into the pro rank with most fighters come in, I would say 99.9% of the fighters come in with some amateur background. It will definitely help you when you go into the pro levels, like it did me and my brother Mike. You trainers out there, try to get your fighters to hit and don't get hit. Because I hate to see fighters receive unnecessary punishment in the ring. When I'm refereeing, I see that these fighters, especially the 4 or 6 round fighters, they're still a little green. They got a lot to learn, but I think a little bit more defense and bobbing and weaving and good ring mechanics, a lot of footwork, and stop trying to be a banger. Unless you're a good knockout artist, it's great. But if you're not, go to the best skills that you can use, and either good boxing skills, constantly moving, slipping, sliding, move, jab, jab, jab. I see guys throw one jab and they wait. And they don't even throw that jab with bad intention. You got to throw that jab in there with intentions to knock the guy's head off. That's what you want to throw jabs. And you throw 2 and 3 of those jabs out there, you know, and throw the combination and slip and move. A lot of fighters don't know how to do this. And that's why you have some of these young fighters today that are taking a lot of punishment. I hate to see that. And go back to the trainers, please take care of these fighters when they're young, bring them up the right way so they can have a long-lasting career in the professional ranks. Okay? And you youngsters that are watching this program as well, staying physically fit, doing your road work, no smoking, no drinking, no drugs. Keep yourself, you know, very focused in the sport. That doesn't have to be boxing. It can be any sport. Keep yourself mentally fit, physically fit, and most of all, be very disciplined about your sport. Because if you're not disciplined about your sport, you're going to end up getting hurt and losing fights, and you're going to get discouraged. And that's what I say to these young gentlemen out there today. Please take care of yourself and keep your guards up at all time. God bless you. Talk to you soon.